One thing to look for online is overtly biased advice. You see this is easy to spot if you see someone who is just vehemently anti-gun. If you see those people, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't understand guns. They don't get it. Or if you see people who say things, well, bear spray is for hippies. Look, there's a time and a place for bear spray. There's a time and a place for a firearm for bear defense. So if you see either one of those occurring, chances are that person has no idea what they're talking about, and you probably shouldn't listen to them. And the bulk of the video is going to focus on the pros and cons of firearms for bear defense, and then obviously the pros and cons of bear spray for bear defense. This video is not intended to address outlier situations, but you will have a lot of people who will say things like, if I were in brown bear country or in grizzly country, I would carry a 45-70 or a 12-gauge shotgun with slugs. While those are great guns, if you are going out on a guided hunt, or if you're hiking in Alaska and things like that, those are great options. But this video is primarily targeted toward people who are weight conscious. They care about the amount of weight that they're carrying. They want to be as light as possible. Maybe they're doing a lot of elevation gain. So I wanted to clarify those two things before we get into the video. Let's start with firearms, the pros and cons. All right, starting with the negatives, starting with the cons of a firearm. I mentioned national parks in the beginning of the video. That's where I just was, an Olympic National Park. Now, it is illegal to discharge a firearm in a national park. Now, look, if you're in a life and death situation, you should absolutely go ahead and use that firearm. But that's one of the negatives of using a firearm in a national park for defense against bear. Let me tell you this right now. You're going to be dealing with people, park people, rangers, employees. I don't know what the percentage is, but let's call it 75% of those people are going to be anti-gun. Depending on the state you're in, it could be higher, it could be lower. But, it's going to be a majority. I would assume in any park in the country, it's going to be a majority. They're going to see you as some yahoo who shot at a bear or shot a bear. It's going to be very difficult to make your case to those people unless you have it on video, some way to demonstrate that you needed to discharge that firearm. So this is something to keep in mind. It's something that you're going to have to contend with. You will be dealing with people, the vast majority, who are not friendly to the Second Amendment in general, let alone discharging a firearm in a national park. So that's something to keep in mind. It puts you in a little bit of a precarious situation. Now look, if I have to use it, I really couldn't care less what other people think. If I have to use it, I have to use it. All right, now let's get to the big one. This is probably the most important one to focus on, and that is using a firearm in a high-stress scenario is not easy. If you have a bear that is charging you, specifically from a short distance, deploying a firearm when your fine motor skills are failing you in that sort of high-stress scenario is not an easy thing to do. Honestly, most people don't have that training, myself included. Most law enforcement people do not have that training. In fact, I would go as far as saying that unless you are in the military with heavy combat experience, you probably do not have significant experience discharging a weapon in an extremely high-stress scenario. Most law enforcement officers, depending on where they work, of course, have probably never discharged their weapon in a line of duty, have probably never shot somebody. Being surprised like that by a wild animal, a large wild animal coming at you, it's completely different than shooting at the range. It's completely different than even taking, there's some great training classes around the country, great instructors. They do their best to replicate those situations, training under stress. You're never even going to get close, though, to what that would be like in real life. So keep that in mind. I think a lot of people overestimate their ability to use a weapon in that scenario. It may come at you out of the brush. You may have, seconds to react. You may only have time to get off one shot. Now look, that doesn't mean you need to place a kill shot on a bear to get it to turn around. Hell, just the sound of the firearm can be enough to turn most bears running in the opposite direction. Depending on where you hit the bear, you don't have to kill it. Wounding it or even hitting it anywhere on its body could send it turning around. But again, keep this in mind if you're carrying a firearm for bear defense. All right, so let's talk about the pros of firearms. What makes a firearm great for bear defense? Well, look, the most obvious one is that it offers you a permanent solution to the problem, okay? Bear spray does not do this. Firearm, if you need it to be, can be a permanent solution to that problem, meaning that you can kill the bear with it. There are instances where bears have returned after being sprayed. This is kind of getting into the bear spray con section, but it's rare, but it does happen. Another pro of a firearm is that it works in windy conditions, all right? The flight path of your bullet is not going to be affected when you're talking about shooting at a range of 20 feet or whatever the distance is. You don't have to worry about that like you do with bear spray. It's not affected by rain, other than obviously it's difficult to shoot a firearm when it's pouring down rain, just as it's difficult to do anything outdoors when it's pouring down rain. But you're not really at the whim of the weather as you would be with bear spray. Another benefit of firearm is that it serves a dual purpose, right? A lot of people concealed carry. It serves a purpose in terms of defending yourself against another person. Look, I concealed carry everywhere that I'm allowed to legally. I recommend that you do the same thing. But that's another benefit of a firearm, is that it serves that dual function. All right, let's talk about bear spray now. Let's start with the cons. This is a can of bear spray I keep here in Tennessee. Obviously, we have a second can, and we take these on local trips, which is very easy because we just throw them in the car with us and we drive there. This is going to present you with a bit of a problem if you fly to your destination. You know, most of the backpacking trips we do, in fact, 99% of them, we're getting on a plane to go somewhere. In order to do that, you've got to figure out, how do I get this can to my destination? Well, you can't take it with you on a plane, not in checked luggage because it's a compressed container. You cannot fly with this in checked luggage. You can't just ship it to where you're going to go. You can, but it has to go ground shipping. You can't just, throw it in your mailbox, put the flag up, and there you go. You have to go to a special UPS store. Not all of the UPS stores will ship these because it's a hazardous material. So if depending on where you live, that might not be a problem. If you live in a really rural area, I don't know how far you're going to have to drive to find a destination that the UPS store that's going to ship this for you. They have to put this special sticker on the outside that designates it as a hazardous material. And you're going to want to do this a couple weeks in advance. It's going to go ground shipping. And you're going to have to make sure that you're staying at a hotel. Otherwise, I don't know, I guess you could ship it to a post office or somewhere and maybe they'll hold it for you. But ideally, you're staying in a hotel the day that you land. You can just ship it to your hotel. I've done this before. But then you've got to ship it back. Well, now you're into one can for $30 in shipping costs. Well, the can's only like 35 bucks. The other option is that you buy it out there and then you just throw it away. Unfortunately, that's really the only option. That's kind of what we decided on doing going forward, is that we're just going to factor this into our vacation costs and say it's just basically a sunk cost. Because once you buy it out there, once you open it, you can't return it. You're not going to, I guess you could give it to somebody, but would you take a can of open bear spray from somebody? How do I know the thing even works or that it's not halfway used? But if you want to take bear spray where you're going and you're getting on a plane, these are things that you're going to have to deal with. You're either going to have to ship it to your destination or you're going to have to buy it out there. Now look, you could buy it at REI and return it. The only way you're going to be able to return it is if you don't open it. Like, you can take it out of the plastic container, but there's a protective zip tie on here. If you take that off, you can't return it. So, you could try, but I think that's a little bit unethical. Honestly, you're kind of forcing the store to take a return that you really shouldn't be doing. That's the biggest downside of bear spray if you're flying to your destination. So that's something that you should consider. Another downside of bear spray is that its effectiveness is subject to weather conditions. All right, when you look at a can of bear spray and it says that its effective range is 30 feet, that assumes, ideal or near ideal wind conditions. Even a slight breeze, side to side or coming toward you is going to affect the effective distance of this spray. Now, it's not going to be a lot unless it's a strong wind, but it is going to affect it. The worst case scenario, obviously, is you have a strong wind coming directly at you. In that case, you probably do not want to use this at all unless it's just a life and death situation and you have no other choice. Maybe if the bear is on top of you or something like that. If you spray this at a bear and the wind's coming directly at you, you end up spraying yourself essentially. Then you're going to be in deep shit. Now you can't see, you're having trouble breathing, you're coughing, there's water pouring out of your eyes, and you've got a pissed off bear coming at you. So you really got to be careful in weather conditions like this. Another potential downside is that this may not deter an extremely aggressive bear that's moving quickly directly at you. What I mean by that is, if you don't use this correctly, if you just let out a tiny burst, and maybe let's say it's a little bit windy and you let out a tiny burst, that bear could plow through that cloud, possibly not be deterred by it. Now, I think a lot of people underestimate exactly how sensitive a bear's nose is to something like this. But look, if it's running at you at 25 miles an hour and you don't let out a big enough spray, there's a chance that it could just burst through that, okay? So if you've got a bear coming at you, maybe you want to spray a little bit more than you would otherwise, especially if it's running full speed. Another downside to bear spray, this is, in my opinion, the big one. This is the most important one, and this is kind of that unique content that I wanted to give you guys. I don't really ever see this mentioned when people talk about bear spray. In my experience, based on what I've seen other people do, the number one downside of bear spray is that people do not store it effectively on their body or on their waist belt somewhere. 99% of the time when I see somebody, specifically in black bear country, with a can of bear spray, it's on their backpack in the water bottle pocket on the side of their pack. That person will never be able to get to that spray if they need it. In those situations, if you're charged by a bear, just don't bring it. The end result will be the same. Now, granted, if you're afforded the luxury of seeing the bear from 50 yards away and you know it's there and you can get it out and you've got it in your hand, that's one thing. But if you are blindsided by a bear and charged, which honestly, look, in most bear attacks, you kind of have to assume that the person surprised the bear and it was charged and they were charged. So they didn't have a lot of time to get to their spray or get to their gun. If you don't have this on the front of your body somewhere, you're not going to be able to get to it. So just don't waste your money if you're going to keep it on the outside of your backpack, in my opinion. You need to have this accessible. Also, have a way to carry it, okay? Have a way to carry it that does not rely on your backpack. A lot of times you see people, they hook it to the chest strap of their backpack, or they put it on the waist belt of their backpack. Well, then when you take your backpack off, they're walking all over, they're going to the bathroom, they're filtering water, whatever they're doing, they don't have this on them. This needs to be on you at all times, all right? It's like, again, it's like a seatbelt. If you don't have it on you at all times, chances are when you need it, you're not gonna have it. So when you take off your pack, put it on your belt, put it on some sort of little chest holster you can get for these things, figure out some way to carry it without your backpack. All right, let's discuss some of the upsides of bear spray. My opinion, the big one is that there is almost no learning curve. Anybody can use this. It does not require any sort of expertise or proficiency. It does not require, any sort of training. You watch a 1-minute video on how to use this and you're pretty much good to go. So this is going to be much easier to deploy in a high stress scenario where you need to do something instantaneously, all right? You're not going to rely on fine motor skills to the same degree that you would with a firearm. Another potential upside is that it doesn't cause a scene. You're not going to have to deal with the potential fallout of discharging a firearm somewhere like a national park where you might not be allowed to. Another one is that it's lighter than most firearms you would carry for bear defense. A Glock 20 or certainly a 44 Magnum or any other large caliber revolver. This is going to be much lighter, so it gives you that option to carry something that's a little bit more weight friendly. So if you haven't figured it out by now, the gist of this video is carry both. I mentioned this in the backpacking and guns video. Carry both. There's no real argument against that other than, it's obviously a little bit of additional weight if you're carrying two things. If you can carry, if state law allows, carry the firearm and carry the bear spray. That way you're going to get the best of both worlds. You're not going to be relegated to dealing with just the pros and cons of one or the other. Just some other general tips. Have at least one other person with you. Statistically speaking, the odds of you getting attacked dramatically decreased if you are in a group of 3 people or more. Make sure at least 2 people have a method of bear defense. That is absolutely crucial. If you're with a group of 5 people and you're the only person in that group that has either a firearm or bear spray, if you get blindsided by a bear, get knocked to the ground, what are the other 4 people going to do? Or worst case scenario, if you're with one other person, what are they going to do? They're going to be resorted to, beating the thing with a stick or something. So at least 2 people in your group need to have some sort of defense. This is even more important if you're somewhere where there are grizzly bears or brown bears. I would say almost everybody in your group. Now look, if you've got 10 people, you don't need to have 10 people with some sort of bear defense. But if you're somewhere like that, if you're in Alaska, if you're with 4 people, maybe it's a good idea for all 4 people to have something. Specifically, if people are going to be split up around camp or anything like that, you don't want to have to pass around a can of bear spray like that amongst 4 people. So more people in your group that have a method to defend themselves, the better off you're going to be. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any insight of your own, I'd really love to hear your bear stories. Please leave them down in the comments section, and thanks for watching.